Larry Wollersheim is a famous name in the history of Scientology. He got in Scientology in the early 1970s, joined the Sea Organization, and then eventually he left. And he's one of the first people to actually sue Scientology and actually win a major award. And it took him over 20 years and numerous appeals before he finally got his settlement with Scientology. Well, he's here to talk to us. He doesn't do interviews very often, but he's got some amazing stories to tell, and we're going to share them with you right now. Here comes Larry Wollersheim on Peeling the Onion. Here we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and I'm here with my co-host, Janis Gillham Grady. We've got an exciting show today, don't we, Janis?
Yeah, we do. We have someone who I've known of them since it was either 73 or 74 when they showed up at Celebrity Center ready to join the Sea Org. And my mom had mentioned, or someone had told her, that Larry Wollersheim has arrived with his family. And I remember looking out the window and seeing Larry and this blonde lady and a kid. And that was the first time I ever heard the name Larry Wollersheim. So, and then I have a later experience with him that I can get into once we get going on the show here.
Yeah, and then I worked for him when I was 19 years old, right before I rejoined the Sea Organization at a company that he had in Washington, D.C., because I needed to pay off some debts before I rejoined the Sea Organization. And we just had a nice little chat about that because I haven't really talked to him since then. And anyway, and then also, you know, he's the person who took on Scientology and actually sued and won a major judgment. And then it took years and years, but he finally did collect on that judgment against Scientology. And the slogan "Not one thin dime for Wollersheim" was concocted by David Miscavige. And unfortunately, Larry Wollersheim got lots of thin dimes from Scientology. So
unfortunately or fortunately.
Yeah, fortunately, yeah. But I mean, unfortunate for Scientology. But anyway, we're really excited to have him here, and we're going to talk to him about how he got in Scientology and his life and all that, and also about the healing process after, you know, this was all over and stuff. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest, Larry Wollersheim. How you doing, Larry?
Hi, Larry.
Hi.
You know, I want to remind you of when I actually met you. Like, I'd seen you at CC and I was on a leave of absence from the Apollo at the time. But when I was 19, I was on a mission in Los Angeles. This was in 75. And I was on my 24-hour wait for okay to go back to the ship. And Ken Lee from Celebrity Center calls me and says, "Hey, you want to go to the motocross tonight at the Coliseum?" And I said, "Sure." I had nothing else to do. And so you and Ken show up on motorbikes, and I get on the back of Ken's motorbike, and we stop at a Japanese restaurant. And you guys ordered sake, and I'd never had sake before. And I'm starting to feel it as I'm drinking it. And then we head off to the Coliseum, the three of us, and we get to the Coliseum. And Ken wanted to switch seats because he didn't have good seats. And so he took us to this whole other area. And I've got a beer in my hand, and I am very tipsy on sake. And I'm standing there, and I had Ken's sweater over my shoulder, and it's about to fall off. So while he's fixing it, I put my hand out, and I let go of the beer. It was a cup of beer that fell on the lady in front of us. I was like so embarrassed. And Ken's like, "Let's get out of here." And so the three of us took off after I soaked this lady's back, and I'm saying sorry. And then after the motocross, we went to a nightclub, the three of us. And I had no ID on me, or I had ID of a 19-year-old. So I'm standing there in line trying to get in. To get in with Ken, and Ken's like, "Don't worry, I'll get you in." I'm like, "Okay." So we're standing there. We get up to the bouncer who's checking all the ID, and Ken goes, "Oh, you must be cold," and moves me right past the bouncer behind him, and gets me into the club. And then you and Ken show your ID, and off we go.
Yeah, I still like sake. Fun. I still like sake. I drink a lot.
You too?
Yeah,
I like it too. It's really good.
I'd never heard of it at the time, and I was too young to be drinking it.
Well, Janis, I was just thinking about this. In the 70s, the drinking age, at least where in Washington, D.C. and Virginia, it was 18. It wasn't 21. They raised it later, right? So you, in California, I don't know what the drinking age was there.
21.
But if you were over 8, you sure? Because it was 18, and then they raised it years later. So you may have been legal.
I couldn't get into the club because I was 19.
Okay. All right. Anyway. Well, Larry, welcome. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
I worked for him briefly. We talked about that beforehand, but that's kind of a boring story for our viewers. We wanted to just get started with, how you got involved in Scientology and, just do a rundown of that.
Sure.
You were in the Sea Org and all that. So go ahead.
I was on a break from college, and I was walking down Mason Street in San Francisco, and this gorgeous woman, a body router, didn't know that at the time, puts what I call the Ethiopian eyeball lock on me. So I think I'm 18, 19. I think, oh my God, I'm going to have some San Francisco sex with this beautiful woman. And she comes up to me and she says, "Come with me. Come with me." I go, "What the hell? I'm from the Midwest." She says, "Come with her. I'm in San Francisco. I'm going." So she walks me up inside the org, walks me into this room, and introduces me to this guy, turns around and walks out and closes the door. And the guy says, "Here's your personality test," and I said, "Where'd the girl go? Where'd the girl go?" He said, "Don't worry, she'll be right back. She'll be right back. Just take this test here first, and then she'll be right in, and then you guys can go have fun, And I'm going, okay. I was, not street smart at all. Grew up in the suburbs. I went to private schools, and I had no idea. So I took the test, and then, they give you the fear thing of, this thing will ruin you. This thing on the test you don't know about, this secret thing you never had to deal with, this will ruin your life. And I went, holy shit. And then they, they draw you into you do the TR's course, and then you have the big trance win, and you go exterior, which is really disassociation. For anybody that thinks exterior is not a common psychological state, called disassociation. But then you think you had the big win and this is significant. So I got all hooked into the wheel, because I was tranceable. I spent time with Margaret Singer, and there's a thing called the eye roll test that you can give to any Scientologist. You know about the eye roll test?
No.
You ask a person, you say, roll your eyes back as far as you can in your head, and you look at how far. Yeah, you're a 5. You're highly suggestible. In Scientology, the highly suggestibles, moderately suggestibles, and somewhat suggestibles are recruited. If you're a cynic, which is way down and not, if you can't barely roll your eyes to the back of your head, because all I'm doing is giving you a suggestion. And before I do the eye roll test, I say, you can roll your eyes all the way back so you can't even see your eyes. And highly suggestibles will shoot their eyes back all the way, and you can't even see them. Yeah. You're a high suggestible. When you did it, your eyes almost disappeared. So anyways, I got caught because I was highly suggestible. They introduced me to a trance state, mislabeled the trance state as a spiritual state, and I was interested in spirituality, and I bought the whole program and just started doing it. Went back home and started earning money and wanted to come and take more courses. Does that help?
Yeah. What year?
Yes.
What was this, the late 60s or early 70s, or when was
early 70s sometime. I have a little dyslexia from all the trauma that I went through in Scientology. So I mix up numbers, if you understand dyslexia. So it's sometime in the early 70s. That's how I got into Scientology.
No, it's just interesting that you mentioned that you were in the Bay Area, right? Because we've interviewed lots of people on our channel, and they all got into
Yeah.
Scientology in the late '60s, early '70s in San Francisco and the Bay Area, because they obviously was a fertile recruiting ground, you know.
This body router was really cute. That's all I can say. She could put that Ethiopian eyeball lock on you, and it was like you were like walking like a robot over to her.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So then, you then, what did you move to Los Angeles or to?
Eventually, I moved to Los Angeles. I got up to grade 4 in the Minneapolis org, and then came out to do power. And after power, I decided to join the Sea Org, and then joined at Celebrity Center, and then went through years of on and off, with different issues and problems with my ex-wife and just life, and going out and earning money to get more to pay alimony and different things like that, and then went up through the OT levels to Ned for OTs and L5.
Right. Now, did you knew Janis's mother, Yvonne, then, right?
Oh, very well. Your mother was an incredible human being. She was the sweetest thing in Scientology.
Oh yeah.
I got to tell you, somehow she resisted being mean, and I mean, she could be stern and direct and demanding about getting your job done, but I never saw a meanness out of that woman, ever. And I saw lots of meanness from other Scientology executives all the time. I mean, really sociopathic meanness, but not your mother. Not your mother.
Now, you worked in distribution, Division 6?
I worked in Division 6. I worked in the Celebrity magazine. I helped run that as marketing director for a while. I worked as a Div 6 Reg, recruiting Division 1, and in the magazine, working with Mike Mnuchin for years, interviewing celebrities and, getting that mag out and getting it done.
Yeah, it was one of the best magazines in Scientology, man.
Yeah.
Everybody looked forward to a celebrity mag coming out because it was
Did-
really well put together.
Well,
Yeah,
I was
Randy-
only a small part of that. Michael Mnuchin's design skills and his attitude he was the magic chemical that made everything else work.
Wow. I always thought Randy McDonald did it.
Nah, Randy didn't have any of the talent necessary to pull that. I don't mean a slight on Randy, but Mike Mnuchin was so incredible that he made all of us rise up to a much higher level. He was the driving talent of Celebrity magazine. No doubt. There's no way, in all the time I was the managing director, nobody could come even close to his skill set.
Right. And it was the best Scientology magazine out there. Nothing got near it.
Right.
Yeah.
So were you in Celebrity Center there on, is that the 8th Street
8th
location?
Street.
8th Street, yeah. And then indirectly, when it moved to the other building, I was there for a while, but mostly on and off with, having to earn alimony and then go back and, you get leave of absence because the alimony payments start piling up and you got a PTS problem, called alimony.
Yeah, because there's no way you could even make alimony money in the Sea Org.
No. So I had to go out and sell meat door to door with Tully's. And
my God, I did that in 1978 too, 77 actually.
Right.
I remember that. Brian Tully.
Right. And then after Tully's, I got involved with Daniel Klein and Brian Reichenberg, I think it is, Brian Reichenberg. And then we started selling jewelry door to door. And then after jewelry, I got in with the little pictures with Frank, whatever his name is, and, doing that. You're driven to bring in money. I mean, talk about motivation.
Oh yeah, no, it's funny you bring up Tully Steaks because I went out to Los Angeles when I was 17 years old, and I was going to do an internship at the Advanced Org, and then I needed to make money. They go, "Oh, we'll go work for this company, Tully Steaks." Just so our viewers know, used to sell door to door in Compton and in Watts and in the poor section of Los Angeles. And of course, we had no idea that there had been riots in Watts in the 60s, or, later Compton became center of all the gang, the Crips and the Bloods and stuff like that. And we would knock on doors and we would sell steaks and hamburgers and stuff.
Hot links. Remember hot links? Yeah, and a couple guys did get beat up and robbed, but I never did. Englewood, Compton, Watts. We were there to make money, and it wasn't a racial thing. I never grew up with a racial thing, and people can feel if you don't have like some sort of I'm looking down at you. I was just looking at money. I wasn't looking at race or anything else. How do we close this deal and move on to the next? Because I got to give more money to Scientology. So
Scientologists were perfect salespeople because they taught them communication and how to make people feel important and this and that. And I actually, after I left Scientology in the Sea Org, I've used that for years when I was in the mortgage business and other things. Just take something that's complex like a mortgage for somebody, make it simple, and they would understand it.
Yeah, we all did big league sales. When you were a registrar or a recruiter, you had to do hard sales courses. And, I did learn a lot of, reach and withdraw and nasty little techniques that just put people on edge and they get your money,
Right.
There were some nasty techniques you were taught in registering people, to really, really make them go and call their parents, take loans out, empty their bank accounts. I can remember doing all that stuff with no conscience whatsoever. Just
it got even worse.
A stat up on the wall.
It got worse years later, where they were taking out fake credit cards and charging them up, and making people take out second mortgages on their homes, and it was more important to give the money, donate it to the International Association of Scientologists than get services. It's really criminal what they do.
Yeah.
They're still doing that, aren't they?
I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't think their need and greed for money has lessened any. But you have a bunch of questions, and we just took a tangent, which I often do.
Okay. So how did you leave the Sea Org? Because what happened? That's what Janis wanted to ask you that.
Okay. I went absolutely nuts, like multi-personality nuts on Ned for OTs. After I had Ned for OTs and L12, and then, Ned for OTs is endless BTs. Okay. I hope we're not shocking anybody here.
No.
But you're in the Sea Org when you were on those levels?
I was on leave because I had money to pay for them, and they loved the money more than having me as a staff member.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I bought all this stuff, gave them all this money because I was making a ton of money. I had 130 people selling door to door for me. So, and then when I went back to Ned for OTs the second time, it's just endless. Okay. And I went so nuts. I was walking around thinking I was 2 or 3 different people. I literally tore down part of Fort Harrison's wall outside the wall, and I was drinking excessively to try to stop the voices. And I was near suicidal. I was looking for my handgun. And luckily, someone caught me at that time before I found my gun and said, "Oh, you just need another repair." And they gave me another Ned for OT repair. And I was still just batshit nuts. There was no two ways about it. My hair was falling out. I'm like 28, 29, and just clumps of hair are falling out. The girlfriend I had at the time, who was new to Scientology, looked over at me and she said, "You're dying. You look like you're dying. You need to get out of Scientology. If you leave, I'll stay with you." And her name was Karen Shepard. She was a black belt in martial arts, and she was really new to Scientology. And if it wouldn't been for her to say, "If you leave, I'll stay with you," I would have never been able to leave. Wow. But those words gave me, because I knew what would happen, you know, like you declared SP, all your friends leave, you know, all your employees who are Scientologists, because they were all Scientologists, you'd be declared, you then, you know, they'd have to leave and quit the company would crash, my whole life would end, basically.
Right.
You know, and so I said, I'm really not doing well and I don't understand it, but you're willing to go with me, let's go. And we took off in my Mercedes. We drove across country and I hid for 6 months in a place in Upper Michigan. And I recovered enough to start to think maybe something wasn't wrong with me, but maybe something was wrong with what they did to me.
It takes time. Peeling that onion, that's what we call it.
Right. It took me 6 months, and then I called Charlie O'Reilly. I started looking at court cases, and I saw Jerry Armstrong's court case. And I went, and this guy is Charlie O'Reilly, and he was twice California trial attorney of the year. So I called him and I said, hey, Charlie, this is what happened to me. And I had written up like 100 pages of what had happened to me. And he looked at it and he said, I want to handle your case, but I need to send you to Margaret Singer to get an evaluation of you first. So then he sent me up on their nickel, drove me, took the train across country, went to see Margaret. Margaret did her first evaluation, and man,
can you tell our viewers who Margaret Singer was? Margaret
Singer was the recognized world's leading authority at UC Berkeley. She's a professor who's published 163 studies on mind control and coercive influence. She used to work for the CIA, which very few people know. And when the Marine pilots who got captured by the Koreans who went on TV and disavowed America, were doing that, and nobody could understand how these really tough Marine aviators, we're not talking pansies here, we're talking the toughest men in the military, are after a few months of being in capture, they're on TV saying America is a bad country, what I did is wrong, the capitalistic system is all garbage. And we're seeing this on national TV, and the government is freaking out. So when they finally traded and got him back, the CI, the first order of business, according to Margaret, was, what did they do to these people? So Margaret and Sheen and Lifton, they were all three CIA people, the top people in mind control understanding, wrote the first papers on second generation mind control, which is the Russian, Korean, Chinese thought reform camps, if you know anything about these terms that I'm using, struggle camps, you know, the gulags, and re-education
camps.
Yeah, and so Margaret, when she left the CIA, you know, she then started helping victims of third generation mind control. First generation are the old ancient cults, hashish assassins, the Egyptian cults, wherever they use drugs and extreme experiences to create fanaticism. Third generation is when you no longer have to put people in prisons, and you no longer have to keep them locked up to run mind control on them. So with Margaret, after her first evaluation, I then became a patient because I was still wacky as a wooden watch. I'm just, you know, it's the way it was. You know, and how many people have heard stories about people going nuts on OT3 and Ned for OTs, and now the new OT8, which is probably another crazy version of more BTs, or, you know, Hubbard with Satan or whatever is going on. Who knows what that stuff is? But then I went into extensive therapy with Margaret over the years, and Margaret's form of therapy was, you got to learn what happened to you. And she would make me read the original mind control studies. She would make me read doctoral theses on mind control and coercive influence. Like, I must have read 100 studies and doctoral theses to understand gradually how Scientology works this third generation mind control, which basically you get caught in it, and it's very difficult to get off that wheel. because the influence is, even though you're not imprisoned, it's everywhere all the time.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that too, because I know Janis, you'll agree with this too. Because when we were at the Gillham Hot Springs, the secret base where Hubbard was going to live and all of that, when we were first there were no fences around the place. Okay, right, Janis? I mean, literally,
yeah.
you could come and go. You could come and go as you pleased. That all came up when Hubbard was going to be coming back. You know what I mean? You know, because he'd been on the lam and hiding, and of course he never did. He died. But that's when the fences came up, right? And then after we escaped, Janis and I and all that, that's when it got even worse, and they were trying to keep people in because they didn't want them to leave. But like you said, the mind control, I didn't think about going or anything like that. I mean, you know, oh yeah, there were terrible things happening and all that, but you just go like, well, I'm part of this group. I wouldn't ever leave. And it's interesting that you mentioned that.
The best prison, the strongest prison is the prison you don't know you're in.
Exactly. And I went through that when they locked me up for 11 days because I wanted to leave and not go to the rehabilitation project force. And I was like, well, where do I go? And I know nothing else. And then it's like, well, what about my future? If I leave Scientology, I'll have a hard time coming back in. And that's all part of the warpedness that you go through.
Right. And the induced phobias, you know, like if you go against Scientology, you're going to drink Drano or get cancer, or, you know,
right.
Just stripping the induced phobias from Scientology and the false data concepts. Mm-hmm. Knowledge is certainty. Power is certainty. You know, all these remember those little phrases that you just knew to be true? They're just horseshit. Most of them are absolute horseshit. But if you believe them, you start to act on them, and then you go from there. But that's another story for another interview.
We did a lot of Chinese school. We did a lot of Chinese school on quotes like that.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And you have to strip those off in normal life, or you're going to be an idiot in the real world. You're going to fail in the real world.
Right.
It's funny that you mentioned this, though, Larry, because when we left, Janis and I and Janis's husband Paul, we all left in 1990. Okay, and it was 4 years after Hubbard died, right? And we were dedicated Sea Org members. We're going to clear the planet, dedicated to L. Ron Hubbard. But of course, I worked for David Miscavige, and Janis had known David Miscavige or did projects, things for him. But we could see that he was not following what Hubbard wanted done, and he was treating people much more severely than had been treated before, even though Hubbard, we're learning, did a lot of bad things, but he was even worse, right? So I think Janis and Paul we were of the same mindset of like, oh, well, we got to get away from here, because we believed, I know I did, that Hubbard was going to come back and he'll sort it out when he comes back. So we'll just leave and go do something else. It took 2 years of being away and experiencing the real world and actually reading books and stuff that we weren't supposed to read that started peeling the onion to the point where I went like, L. Ron Hubbard was a liar and a fraud. I mean, I was 14 when I got involved in Scientology. I had no other, datum of comparable magnitude. So what you say is really true. I mean, you get locked into this prison of belief, and it's hard to get away from.
Really hard. Like I said, if it wouldn't have been for that woman saying those words, if you leave, I will stay with you. And I think a lot of ex-Scientologists or Scientologists that want to leave right now don't have that person who's saying to them, if you leave, I will stay with you. Because you go through a bounce when you leave. You go through a fall and a bounce and then some more bounces. And if you don't have one person who's consistent and stable, it makes it a lot harder to get in a recovery mode.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, well, I was born into Scientology and in the Sea Org at the age of 11. So I had no real outer world experience. So there were many times I thought of leaving, but it was like, well, what would I do? And then
where would you go?
I'd have no friends. Yeah. Right. Where would I go? So when Miscavige went berserk after the flood, And I turned to Paul and I said, I'll take the car. And Paul said, I'll take the bike. I knew at that point I had someone that had experienced the outside world that I could depend on.
There you go.
And when we left, it was a whole different role, because in the Sea Org, I was always the senior. But as soon as we left, I had to depend on him as to tell me what was right and what was wrong.
Right.
Because he had been in the real world before he got into Scientology. Anyway, sorry, go ahead, Larry.
Maybe this is something real important that should be widely distributed, is that one person who will stay with you. I don't know if most exit counselors actually voice this, because you just mentioned you had the stable person who said, let's go. Did you have a stable person who said, let's go, Mark?
Well, it's a funny story, because that same night that Paul and Janis decided to leave, when Miscavige went crazy on the flood, I decided, without talking, I was standing next to Paul in the dining area, and I said, Miscavige has gone nuts. I got to get out of here. Without talking to each other, we left the same night. Okay.
Wow.
And I went, I didn't know what to do. I ended up going to my sister, who was a Scientologist, at her home in the Hollywood Hills. And I was there, and I was totally torn, and I went to sleep. And when I woke up, there was Mike Sutter and Osa to take me back to the base. And they made a big mistake, right? Because they said, oh, Janis and Paul Grady left last night too. And I immediately thought, there's somebody else out there that I know, that I'm not going crazy. And the next chance I get, I'm going to go and I'll hook up with them. Because the reason I came back also, because I was still married and my wife would not leave with me. And I was really torn by that. And so I wanted to go back and try and convince her to leave, but that never happened. And so I ended up leaving a couple months later. And then it wasn't within about a month that Janis found me. And this is 1990, before the internet. Called me and found me, by looking in the yellow pages for my ex-wife's father. And that's how we all ended up together.
Very cool.
But in the Sea Org, if you want to leave, you're not allowed to tell your spouse or anyone that you want to leave. And I've actually noticed, and there's a lot of couples out today where one of them left and the other one immediately followed, and they're still a couple, but they didn't discuss it while they were in there. It took that one going without them that they were like, oh, he did want to leave. It's not just me. I'm going to go join them.
That's a nice thing. That's a nice healing process.
Yeah.
I know you have more questions.
Yeah. Well, now I want to get to, you mentioned, I got you off on Margaret Singer, but you were Charles Riley, that was your attorney.
Charles O'Reilly, the Brown Green law firm in Los Angeles, is a big, powerful firm that wasn't easily intimidated for quite a while. Eventually, they did get intimidated, but not Charlie.
How did you go about your lawsuit then? Obviously, you contacted them, but how did it all work out? And
I sat down with Charlie, and I felt that this was a man of integrity that couldn't be intimidated, which was correct. And I said, let's do the case. And he was a Loyola grad school of law, #1, valedictorian. He's a fucking genius. Excuse my language.
It's okay.
And he laid out how we're going to do this. He laid out what's called the torts, the charges. Okay. And he did it so brilliantly that it just screwed Scientology up, because they couldn't do the normal defenses. Oh, it's all religion. It's all this. He had 4 angles, and he was always playing the chess game of 5 moves down the way. He was always playing, this case is going to go to the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. We got to play the game for the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals. So he completely reversed everything into the basic beginning of the court. And he's a Columbo-like trial lawyer. If any of you sat in the court, he comes in a ruffled suit. He shuffles in. He looks like he was drunk the night before. No, I'm not making this up. If you were sitting there, and he kind of mumbles around and, hem-haws, and he does never direct questions. He'll ask this and then go over here and then go over here and then over there, to get where he really wants to go. And so the person on the stand is answering the questions and he builds a rhythm with them, and then he asks the question he really wants to ask, and they have no idea that they've been set up with all their previous answers. And
Right.
he intimidates, embarrasses, and gets to the facts that most people couldn't do. He's a brilliant. The reason he's the only attorney in the history of California that was twice named California Trial Attorney of the Year. That's
Wow.
how good he was. So he won the case on his strategic brilliance and his Columbo. Just, I mean, and I used to go out drinking with him at night. There's a Yamashita's. There's a big Japanese restaurant in Hollywood up on a
Yeah.
hill. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
I do. I do.
We used to go there, and after court and during the setups, get roaring drunk. And I used to get moderately drunk, and Harley and Charlie used to get horrendously drunk, slurring your words drunk. And he'd go in the trial the next day, and he would be brilliant. And I don't know how he did it. We'd be up to 2, 3 in the morning. At 9, 10 o'clock, we're in his law office, and we're getting ready to go to court with the bodyguards. He was an amazing attorney. But there are lots of good attorneys, and the Wollersheim case, everything we did is with Steve Kent at the University of Alberta. 300 bankers boxes. You don't have to spend the millions of dollars that I spent in defense, or the 140 million. We estimate Scientology spent $140 million on the Wollersheim case and still lost. That's why they don't do that anymore. You don't have to spend that, because any good attorney calls up Stephen Kent at the University of Alberta, gets the tort list, gets the document list, and says, send me this, send me this, send me this, send me this. And next thing you know, he's playing with the big boys and has got the strategy that already beats Scientology. And the saddest thing for me is that more people haven't realized that it took 30 years to break that trail, but that trail's there for anybody. Why should I be the only one who gets $9.2 million for the trauma Scientology caused? To put my life back into order and have a decent rest of my life. Every ex-Scientologist should be getting paid and going through the justice healing process, because there's healing with psychologists, but an even more powerful healing is when you take the oppressor that oppressed you and you oppress them in the legal process, and you win, and you take their resources to restore and renew your life. That is justice healing that doesn't make you just whole. It makes you much stronger than you ever were when you were in Scientology, because you have turned that wound into a tempered, healed strength. So my hope is that people watching this, they get a hold of Steve Kent at the University of Alberta in that archive, and you guys go get your money. Go get who's it, Tom Cruise? What did he say? Show me the money.
Yeah, show me the money. Yeah.
I was going to make 2 points. Current situation, right? There's an attorney who's a friend of ours. I don't know if you know him, Graham Berry, right?
I know Graham real well.
Yeah, and he's taken on several cases where people have been ripped off by Scientology over their credit cards and this and that. And he's actually been settling these cases in favor of the defendant. They don't even go to trial. They've been getting settlements and stuff like that. But here's the problem, right? If the case involves David Miscavige, like they've sued David Miscavige, they made a change, after Janis and I left Scientology, I don't know when they did, where they made people sign these agreements that include an arbitration clause, right? And it wasn't until recently that they realized that they could use that in the court because they're quote unquote in a religion. And they've had judges, federal judges, rule in the favor that the person has to go to arbitration, even though they left Scientology. So that's where the current cases are that are going on right now. They're mainly the ones, though, that involve David Miscavige, because he does not want to ever be deposed, because he would basically, the jig would be up if that happened. You know what I mean?
Right. Now, a good attorney can challenge those arbitration clause is an arbitration, mandatory arbitration is being challenged all over the country right now by people who aren't in Scientology. And because you did this under the duress in an influence, a coercively influenced environment, a good attorney who is willing to take it to the Supreme Court, because they will fight that one to the Supreme Court.
Oh yeah.
That will disappear, you know. So
that's what's happening right now. It's happening in the Leah Remini lawsuit. It's happening in the victims for the Danny Masterson, case is there, and also Val Haney. She's actually going through arbitration right now because a federal judge said you got to go through the arbitration before I can determine whether or not it was fair or not. Which is ridiculous. But anyway, that's
she needs a good attorney to appeal that judge's decision. See that you got to go. Road. Yeah. We were to the California Supreme Court 13 times and the U.S. Supreme Court 5 times in the Wollersheim case. Okay.
Now, when did your case first start, and then when did you finally? I know because
I think it started in 79 or 80. The numbers with me are always like this.
That's okay.
And it ended in 2002 when the last appeal and the last thing they did was done, and they had to deposit $9.2 million to pay off the judgment.
And that was over 20 years almost.
Yeah, so it's been 20 years.
That shows your persistence, Larry.
Well, it was a team. You don't take on a monster like Scientology by yourself. I don't care how tough and mean you are or how smart you think you are.
Right.
I had a team of phenomenal attorneys, phenomenal girlfriends, friends, family. It's just, I took a beating and they all took a beating, and I didn't quit because I was so angry. I was so angry about what they did to me. But if it wouldn't have been for the skill sets and the support of people around me, we would have never made it. That's the way.
I was going to ask how.
I'm more than I am, but I'm less than I am actually.
No, I understand. I was going to ask you, why did you stick to it? Obviously, because a lot of people would have folded their tent after you stuck with it all the way through all these appeals and everything.
Because I saw what it did to my son.
Okay.
Because it so hurt my son. My son died, an alcoholic and a drug addict.
Oh, I did not know that. Sorry.
Yeah, and he had to go. We had to put him in jail to stop him from. He had alcohol psychosis. We had to put him in jail to dry him out. He got alcohol cirrhosis. They let him out of jail because they didn't want to cover his medical and cover a transplant. And he couldn't stay sober while waiting for a transplant, and he died while waiting for his liver transplant. And what was done to him in the nursery, what was done to our family, what was done to my ex-wife. My ex-wife was burned in the kitchen, and they didn't even tell me about it when I was on the RPF. And the only reason they asked me to go see her was to convince her not to sue the Church of Scientology for the burns that she, experienced while cooking in the kitchen. And I was so combination of ashamed of myself for not caring for my family and at the minimal level and allowing them to split us up, to farm out my son to terrible care. He got like scabies and all kinds of diseases in the nursery, and felt abandoned because we were working all the time, and I felt so ashamed of what I didn't do and so angry about what was done to our family that I made a promise to my son that I'd keep it going so that it did not happen to other families, and we would put a road there that other people could take. We put a legal pathway, and all they have to do is just grab the documents and go get their money. Tell them Tom Cruise said, "Show me the money." And that's what kept me going. It's a combination of shame and anger.
Well, we salute you
Right.
because
Yeah.
we know how tough it is. I mean, we haven't even asked you about fair game. I guarantee they must have done things to you over the years. I mean,
We
because they
had
did it to
fake
us, and
bombs,
we never sued, and we had lots of fair game. How about you?
fake bombs on my parents' door. My dad has a heart condition. They had to call the bomb squad. Animals killed. My sister being confronted at a department store, and the guy says, "We're going to kill your brother. Get him to stop." You know, crazy, crazy stuff. I mean, fake girlfriends, fake prostitutes sent to me. My employer turned against me because they found blackmail on him and turned into setting me up for a sting operation. You know, ex-girlfriends and their daughters and families attacked. Like they put a PI on an ex-girlfriend's daughter during the trial, you know, and he acted like he was romantically involved with her and he was enthralled with her. And he was just listening to me talk to Charlie O'Reilly on the phone in Aspen, Colorado. Okay. And obviously when, you know, a young girl who thinks she's dating this wonderful man finds out that he's being paid to spy on someone in your house, it doesn't make for good relationships with
No.
your ex or the daughter. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. I had employers called and told, you know, said anybody that would give me money or I would go to work for, this guy is an SEC con man. He's wanted for all kinds of crimes. You know, they'd call him up and they'd scare the hell out of these employers,
Yeah.
you know, and it's just on and on and on and on. There's so much that after a while you become immune to it.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
Margaret Singer put me through modified CIA and Mossad psychological warfare stress management training, and it was unbelievable. She put me through shit that just hardened my ass because she was the therapist in her early years at the CIA. She would work with the deep cover spies in foreign countries who had, you know, they were there under, you know, in deep cover, and she would keep them from going nuts. And the CIA's developed very good stress management threat training to keep their deep cover spies from going nuts. Because you know what the number one problem with deep cover spies is? According to Margaret Singer in the CIA, they go fucking nuts. They go totally batshit because they have no real connections. Everything is false.
False.
And you know how bad it is when a deep cover agent goes nuts in a foreign country? That's really bad for America. So these CIA psychiatrists were like on these people in every way they could to be monitoring how crazy they were getting and training them to deal with the enormous stress under constant life and death threat of being caught.
Wow.
Larry, we're about 10 minutes until we got to finish.
Okay, so
we wanted to ask you about the Eddie Walter. Do you want to tell that story now, or do you want to talk about?
I want to save Eddie Walters for your listeners. I'm going to give him a teaser.
Okay.
Eddie Walters was the guardian in the LA org, and Eddie left Scientology, and he knew he was going to be stung by the guardian's office. And Eddie had a wife who was mean as hell and would just kill him if he ever cheated. But Eddie was also, what is the polite way to say, he loved to love other women on the side. And there's whatever words you want to use for that. So he knew he was going to get stung, but he was such a hound, he couldn't turn it down when it came. So Eddie Walters devised a plan for when Scientology sent those high-priced prostitutes to him to get laid and fuck Scientology at the same time. And if when we do our healing thing, the next video, I will tell the whole story of Eddie Walters on how he embarrassed the hell out of David Miscavige, and this video that was produced, it's like nothing you couldn't believe, and it's all about lipstick. That's the
Okay,
key.
good.
This is the Eddie Walters lipstick story, and a few people know about it. That we're around with Charlie O'Reilly, because Eddie told this story originally to Charlie O'Reilly when Eddie was a witness, and he was trying to prepare Charlie for what's going to happen to Charlie. So we'll leave that for the future. Any last questions?
I have a quick question. Earlier, you mentioned going to the courtroom with bodyguards.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You guys actually had bodyguards to get from wherever to the courthouse.
We had from 3 to 5 bodyguards at any one time. One of our bodyguards was bought off from Scientology. He literally was given a suitcase with $25,000 in it. He got caught, okay, and he apologized to us profusely, admitted, he'd given me $25,000. That reminds me of the sheriff in Aspen who was bought a boat to testify against me in my case, and then apologized publicly to me years later, saying he was so ashamed of what he did because the money was so good and he was retired. He took the cash and, but I got lost track a little bit. Bring me back.
No. So you've got some more stories, obviously, to tell. I just wanted to mention one other thing, just for our viewers. Eddie Walters also had been in Las Vegas, and he was their guardian's office man here in Vegas for years. He handled when Quentin Hubbard committed suicide. He was here and did the investigation on that. So and he was a friend of Janis's. Unfortunately, he passed away recently because we were going to interview him about all that. But anyway, we would love to hear that story about Eddie Walters. So that's a good teaser for a future episode.
Eddie was a pool shark before he got inside.
Yeah.
He was a hustler. He was a hustler, and he was not going to get hustled by Scientology.
No.
But that's what that Tom Cruise movie, The Hustler or something like that, that was about Eddie.
Are you kidding?
Eddie Walters? That was a Paul Newman character.
That's what Paul Newman. Yeah, that's what Eddie told me.
Wow.
That was about him. Yeah.
Wow.
And then he was also the very mob connected at the Sands Hotel. He was a pit boss there, and he knew all the the big
that's Eddie.
Players. And,
Eddie was his nails.
Everyone
connected.
When I met that guy, this guy was tough as nails. Absolutely. You pull shit on me. Doesn't matter. I've seen it all. He's a hardcore Las Vegas hustler.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And he also was a trained Class 8 auditor in Scientology and a case supervisor for years. And then he got out too. And so we've got that.
He still believed in a lot of Scientology. He used a lot of the admin technology. He had a big attorney firm before he died, very successful, and he preached Scientology admin to those people.
Well, you can't say everything in Scientology was bad because Hubbard stole a lot of good things.
That's right.
He stole a lot of good things.
We talk about that, Larry, all the time because I got benefits out of it that I still use to this day. But then the OT3 and all the knots and all that, because I did all that too. Yeah, though that's a bunch of hogwash, But some of the basic stuff I learned, I still use to this day.
One last thought that Margaret taught me in the last 2 minutes here. Mm-hmm. In brainwashing, the most important thing is you have to reach the person's core sense of identity. You have to attack their core sense of identity and convince them they are not what they think they are. Once you attack core identity and you convince the person you are not what you've always thought you are, you control them. Tell me something that is better to attack your core sense of identity and who you've always thought you are than OT3 and Ned for OTs.
Right.
Yeah. Very,
right.
very.
You think of anything better than that?
No.
Right.
On that thought, we're going to we'll say you're going to sign off, and then we'll schedule up something on healing and more fun.
Yes, and we're going to do that live. We'll do that live. Larry has to run.
Some more shows. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
Larry, let
Larry
me go
has
ahead
to
and end
run.
the show, but stick around just for a minute, okay? I'm going to end
Okay.
this off here. I want to thank everybody for watching. Please subscribe to our channel. Hit that like button. It really helps us get the message out. This message is important to get out to people. So please subscribe to our channel, okay? If you have any questions or comments about what we talked about, go down below. You can comment. We check them all the time. And if you'd like to support our channel, you can buy us a coffee. There's a link down below in the description. Any support, we really greatly appreciate it. And we want to thank you, Larry, for being here. And we will have you back very soon. Okay.
All right. I enjoyed this more than you can imagine. As you know, for the last 20 years, I've been pretty absent because I had so much of it. I needed to reestablish a normal life. But
I understand.
this, I think, is therapeutic. And I hope that there are people out there that could get some benefit, from some of the stuff that's happened to me and the great work you two are doing. So on that,
Right. Thank
bye,
you.
everybody.
We'll see everybody.
Bye.
Wait till next time.